think I'd try this a new way. I'm gonna show you the tricks that I know. I'm getting tired of talking, and I need more of a show right now. It's time that you made your mind up, 'cause lately all it ever does is change. Feels like we're only talking, going round and around, back around. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay. 'Cause now is the right time, and I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I know I can win right now. You got me up tonight, 'cause loving you is like I'm walking a tightrope so high. I won't be turning around, no, I won't be turning around. It's the right time, you feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I will win tonight. I think I'll do it on my way. I'm gonna show you what I'm going through, get you out of your comfort zone, 'cause I need more of the truth right now. It's time that you made your mind up, 'cause lately all it ever does is change. Feels like we're only talking, going round and around, back around. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay. 'Cause now is the right time, and I'm feeling alright. I'm playing your game like I know I can win right now. You got me up tonight, 'cause loving you is like I'm walking a tightrope so high.
Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word Live into some British Grand Prix race reaction. How are we all doing this lovely Sunday? I'd call that evening, 5:05. I'll go with evening. Hope you're all well and enjoyed what was. I hope a lot of people don't look at that race and say that was epic, because it wasn't until the last few laps and maybe the opening laps, but it was okay, wasn't it? It was cars going around on a Sunday, and quite frankly, I'm always going to enjoy that to some point. So yeah, not an awful race, but I think was hoping for better at Silverstone. But those final few laps, wow, what an end to that Grand Prix. We'll get into that very, very shortly. If you are tuning into the race reaction, spoiler alert, if you've not seen the race, please go watch at least the last few laps, but that's fair warning, easily. I'd be surprised if anyone's tuning into a race reaction and is shocked by the fact I'm about to give the results away. But anyway, Lewis Hamilton took the victory for Mercedes, 5.8 seconds clear of Max Verstappen, but that does not tell the full story by a long shot. Wow, I can't get over it. We'll go into it in a second. Charles Leclerc, third place for Ferrari. Really good weekend for him. Daniel Ricciardo, fourth. Lando Norris in fifth. Esteban Ocon in sixth place. Pierre Gasly, again, points in P7. He's been doing a stellar job for AlphaTauri this season so far. Alexander Albon in eighth place. Lance Stroll in ninth. Racing Point just 2 points on the board. I don't think many people would have predicted that this weekend. 10th for Sebastian Vettel. Yeah, Valtteri Bottas 11th, George Russell 12th, another good weekend for him. Carlos Sainz 13th, Antonio Giovinazzi in 14th. I think he got a penalty after the race, but that's why that result is probably wrong. So he probably drops a few places, the 5-second penalty. But I don't think it matters to his race, does it? Nicholas Latifi 15th, Romain Grosjean, Mr. Swervy, in 16th place. Kimi Raikkonen 17th, Daniel Kvyat, Kevin Magnussen failed to finish. And heartbreak for poor Nico Hülkenberg. People talking, I saw them in chat before this, about luck. That guy gets none. That is ridiculous. Finally comes back to Formula One to fill in for Perez. We're all talking about, is this his chance in a car to score a podium? Doesn't even start the race. Oh, the poor guy. But anyway, let's hop straight into this one then and say a very good evening to the Chamber himself, Mr. Stewart. Hello, Stewart. Did you enjoy that one?
Hello and good evening. What a thrilling few laps that was.
Yeah, I said at the start, I hope people don't start talking about how great that race was, because it was kind of, I think I said it on Twitter, the opening 8 to 10 laps were pretty good, and then kind of went really quiet, and then the final 3 laps were demolition derby, weren't they, really, in some way? Absolute carnage. I mean, we've got to talk about the tyres. It's a place we have to start. We always usually talk about the top 3, but the big talk is tyres. We've seen it at Silverstone before, haven't we? Tyres just falling apart, but they all seem to be the same one. So there was Valtteri Bottas's left front fell to pieces, then Lewis Hamilton's left front fell to pieces, and then Carlos Sainz's fell to pieces. I mean, I was kind of at the point in that race, I'm not going to lie, where I was like, well, I might as well get the stream ready now. Nothing's going to happen. And then boom. I mean, wow. Raises some questions for next week, though, Stuart, that's for sure.
Yeah, next week, of course, we had the hardest 3 compounds given to the cars this week, but next week we're going one step softer on all of them, I think. So likely to see some 2 stops. When that second safety car came out and everyone, well, almost everyone stopped to switch onto the hards, I did think, are we really going to go to the end? Because we're only on lap 12 right now. Are they really thinking they can just go the rest of the race without any pit stops? This is a demanding track, and you know what? Right on the margin, absolutely right on the margin of making it.
Let's not forget as well, talk about Daniel Kvyat's left rear or right rear delaminating as well, which put him into a really, really nasty accident. So Pirelli have definitely got some investigating to do, and obviously not a lot of time to do it, really, because Silverstone again next weekend. But we'll start with Lewis Hamilton. I mean, first of all, before we talk about tyre delaminations, he was absolutely dominant, wasn't he? Absolutely dominant. That race was his, whatever had happened. Bottas couldn't quite do enough to get anywhere near him. There's a few moments where I thought he was going to close a gap, but it never really happened. It was just another dominant drive from Lewis, and obviously with everything that happened, now 30 points clear after 4 races. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he just walked over everyone this weekend, didn't he? He looked pretty unstoppable, which is interesting because, Bottas has been pretty good here, but the Mercedes in particular just were in a different class of racing. Formula Zero seemed to be invented just for the Mercedes. Although actually, I say that, looking at some, analysis of Mercedes. I can't remember who did it now. This is terrible. I'm borrowing someone else's insight here, but Mercedes seem to be increasing with the kind of level of pace you'd expect year on year from a normal team, and it's other teams that aren't keeping up with them. So people who have problems with Mercedes being as fast they are should really look to the rest of the field. But yeah, Hamilton, can't really fault him, even when he's got 3 wheels on his car, still able to bring it home ahead of Verstappen on a fresh set of softs. So yeah, blew everyone away, didn't he?
I mean, everyone talks about Mercedes ruining F1, but what's that saying? Was it "Don't be bitter, be better," or something like that came out this weekend?
I didn't hear that. That's a good saying, though.
It is. It's absolutely spot on. I've always said this. I've been saying this for years. Yeah, Mercedes are dominating, but don't ever aim your anger at people on social media anyway. Certainly not the social media teams. They're not building the car. I know in the heat of battle, as Hazel well knows, I've been known to lose it a little bit with social media people. But yeah, I think if you're going to aim your anger at anybody, it needs to be Red Bull and Ferrari, because Red Bull have built a car they don't really understand, and Ferrari have had theirs designed probably by the same person that designed Lando Norris's helmet. Although that said, Charles Leclerc had a great weekend. We'll get to him in a second. But yeah, it was all looking good for Mercedes. Hamilton and Bottas absolutely gone, and then it all just literally fell apart. I mean, do we think that's, because obviously we don't know until Pirelli gets some more information out, do we think that is debris on the track, Stuart, or is it more likely that it's something that, like we saw a few years ago, where the tyres just gave up a little bit too hot? They were on, as you've already said, for a really long time as well. So I'd be personally more inclined to lean towards the tyres just giving up, because they would have been on them mediums a lot longer than 12 laps.
Yeah, I'll reiterate. We wait for the data back from Pirelli, who may want to save face a little bit, but I actually have to look at Bottas's tyres again. But with Sainz and Hamilton, we saw the tyre essentially breaking at the rim, at the shoulder, which is a natural weak point for the tyre. It's where it sort of bends from one part of the tyre to another, as opposed to if it ran over a debris, you probably would have seen like a normal puncture down the middle of the tyre. I'm not sure if I explained this properly, but essentially we saw the wall. If you look at Hamilton's tyre in particular, you see the side wall of the tyre split from the main tread of the tyre just straight down the shoulder line, which suggests it weakened over the course of those 40 odd laps that it was on that tyre and couldn't take any more, which isn't that surprising, seeing as it's a very high speed track and the cars will be leaning on that tyre quite a lot. And they did pit rather early, even for a hard tyre. So, and Hamilton was saying he was being pushed all the way by Bottas. I know he eked out a few seconds lead, but that's how Mercedes tend to run. He said he wasn't really resting at any point in that race. So that's kind of what could be expected. And yeah, we can see it on the circuit now. And I think on the stream now, you put up the picture of it. I think if it had been debris, we would have seen, some point on the main tread of the tyre where the debris had cut into the tread and that had failed. But we're sort of seeing the tyre fail at a natural point of weakness. So that's why I would assume that tyre had just had enough of racing.
Yeah, my excellent live stream editing going on right there. Oh, that was brilliant.
Loving it. I loved it.
Oh, not quite big enough. No, I forgot to put that in the stream, but I thought it was worth having on while you were talking about the tyre there. But yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, debris maybe. The marshals were quite slow at clearing stuff today, but Martin Brundle made the point in commentary that could be more about the fact there are fewer marshals than anything else. So yeah, but I mean, same thing for Mercedes, for both Mercedes, I think, by the look of it, and for Carlos Sainz too, ruined his race. But I do want to address something. I've already done it on Twitter and then managed to get myself royally wound up. As is, for once, on the F1 word, Sean annoyed, never. I have seen a lot of people talking about penalties for Lewis Hamilton and should he get one. I suspect for a lot of people that's more out of frustration than anything, because he's got, in air quotes, lucky, as people see it. So yeah, no penalty for me at all. If you're giving Hamilton a penalty, you've got to give Bottas a penalty. And it's okay saying, well, Bottas pitted. If it had been the last lap, Bottas would not have pitted. No way. Secondly, Hamilton literally did 3 more corners. If we at the end of the lap, I mean, he's gone through Vale and Club and that's it, and to the start-finish line. Even if he comes through the pits, he still wins the race because that line is before his pit box. So it's not a penalty. And Tom from WTF1 made the point on Twitter. I retweeted it. I don't ever remember this argument coming up when Sergio Perez was cruising to the line with no front wing or front wing hanging off, which was actually probably more dangerous, to be fair, in Austria. So no penalty for me, Stuart. I already know your answer to this because you responded to my tweet. But for those who maybe aren't on Twitter, do you think that's a penalty for Lewis Hamilton or Bottas, or should it have been for both? Or neither?
No, it's not a penalty. And there's a few reasons for that. I mean, partly the final lap is a little bit different in that, well, as you say, going into a pit stop is at most a few corners at any track, at most a couple of corners snipped off the whole lap. So he would have had to do that entire lap anyway. And he wasn't, shedding rubber all over the track, or the tyre wasn't ripping parts of the floor or the front wing. So he wasn't like spreading debris everywhere and causing the track to become dangerous, at which point, maybe he would have thought either slow down or pull off the track if that's, if you're causing danger to other cars, which he wasn't. And actually, Toto was saying part of the conversation they were having with him on that last lap was just to tell him to make sure that the car wasn't like throwing parts of itself all over the track, and to drive in a way that made sure that didn't happen. Because maybe they were, the naive suggestion would be to make sure they were being safe for other cars, but I think they just wanted to make sure they wouldn't get a penalty. But yeah, when you're on the last lap and your car's broken, as long as you're not driving dangerously or causing danger to other cars, then it's fine. Finish the lap. That's fine. I did see someone else suggesting that because Hamilton had a puncture, the ride height of the car would have been below legality. So I think a lot of clutching at straws, hoping something can intervene in this championship. But at the moment, Hamilton looking very good.
Maybe I'm naive when I say this. I don't think it's necessarily aimed at Hamilton. I think if Verstappen was comfortably dominating the championship, so with Red Bull, I think a lot of people would be more out of hope than expectation, trying to get something to try and liven things up and get somebody a win that isn't a Mercedes, or in that case a Red Bull. Maybe I'm naive with that, I don't know. But I'm with you. If he's scattering debris everywhere, yeah, black and orange flag him, tell him to get in the pits. Even if he wins it crossing the line in the pit lane, at least he's coming to the pits. But that argument is, there was no debris shedding. But I was quite surprised, not going to lie, that when Bottas's tyre failed and Verstappen made his stop, Mercedes didn't just pit Hamilton. He had 2 pit stops in hand in the end, almost, didn't he? So I was quite surprised to see that Mercedes didn't think, well, I'll tell you what, we've just seen his teammate's tyre fail. Verstappen's gone for fastest lap. We've got plenty of time in hand. I know hindsight's a wonderful thing. It's 2020 and all that, but I really thought maybe they pull him in and just stick some mediums on, or he didn't have any new mediums, maybe just another set of something. Some used mediums would have been better than the hards that he ended up with at the end of the race, to be fair. But yeah, I was quite surprised they didn't pull him in the pits. I was fully expecting that call to come. So again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? So maybe we can say that now, but at the time, I mean, the data might have said they were fine. I can't imagine that they'd have left him out if they believed they were if they had information that said these are going to blow up. So I don't know. Maybe I'm alone on that one. I'm just looking at what chat are saying.
And I could see what you're saying with that, and that does seem like the sensible option. But you're right. I mean, if the data seemed fine, and Hamilton's constantly moaning about his tyres anyway, so you can take what he says with a pinch of salt. And actually, as it turns out, they were fine.
Yeah.
He still came first, but just lost that fastest lap, which probably won't cost him in the end. Let's be honest.
Max in chat just pointing out that the AWS graphic was right. Of course, wasn't it? That we saw off on screen, a red tyre for Hamilton. It was like, really? Thanks for that, guys. Fantastic. Yeah, Danny K says Extreme BHP in chat. I do wonder if that was a tyre failure. I've not seen anything from the team that suggests it was, but that was a really nasty accident, so maybe a little bit of foreshadowing there. And of course, Carlos Sainz had the same problem as well, same side as well. So I do wonder if Pirelli might consider, I suppose depending on what their data says, bringing the harder tyres to next weekend. I'm kind of hoping, and you can all have a go at me now about safety if you want, I'm hoping they don't, because but the F1 turn around and say, or Pirelli turn around and say, mandatory 2 stops. You have to pit twice, because these tyres are softer than last week and we don't want any major accidents. We don't want anything like that. So you've got to pit at least twice and it will give us more pit stops. So the teams are going to have to adapt. They're going to have to react. They're going to have to get out on Friday and get as much data as possible. So we, in theory, should end up with a more exciting weekend and a more exciting race. The only problem is, if Pirelli turn around and say mandatory two-stopper because we don't think these tyres can do the distance, the FIA and F1 are immediately going to slap down on them and say, no, we need the other tyres back. Because safety will always come first, won't it? If there is a risk that those tyres are going to blow up, they'll bring the harder compounds.
Yeah, I did see, and I did think about this. As that was part of the conversation, I think, in those final laps as well, was will Pirelli reconsider their next week's compounds? And I don't know if they'll be available. I say that I genuinely don't know, because they prep all these tires a few weeks in advance and bung them all together, and these are the tires they've got prepared for next week. And I just wonder if they'll have the have the compounds available to bring a full set of, what's it? I always get this wrong. C5. I'm going to say C5 is the hardest end.
C1 the hardest.
There we go.
Is it? Oh, you've got me doubting myself now.
Well, the hardest compound, I just wonder if they'll have that available, because they're all manufactured for the race weeks in advance. So I guess we'll wait and see. I think at least we've got some information about some of these tyres, I guess. I mean, we're not going to see that hard compound back again next weekend. We're going to see softer compounds. So you'd think teams would naturally go to a two-stop strategy anyway. I think that's going to be a hot topic conversation over the next few days as to what teams decide to do, because we don't want a Silverstone 2013, I want to say, where the tires are just exploding all over the place and we get a red flag. We don't want an Indy 2005 where the whole Grand Prix is deemed too unsafe to run. We want a good Grand Prix run to a safe standard that the organisers agree with. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a hard one to call as to what they choose to do. But again, everyone did stop very, very early in this race and tried to run to the end. And I imagine without safety cars coming that early on in the race, they probably would have taken that. Most of them started on mediums, didn't they? They've taken that much further into the race.
Klaas de Boer makes a really good point, and totally my thinking here. Says no mandatory pit stop. Some cars could handle it. That's the thing, isn't it? If you throw a mandatory two stop, just because Mercedes tyres are exploding, it doesn't mean that Williams' tyres are going to. So why should they have to suffer that penalty? But again, safety is always going to come first. Also, thank you very much to the super chat. I'll read them through the stream and I'll do them later on as well to make sure I get them all. From Duncan Morley says, Crofty pointed out when Albon pitted, the hards would last 40 laps. No investigation necessary, as they pitted on lap 12 and pushed the hards to the limits. That's kind of the point there, isn't it? If they'll do 40 laps and they came in lap 12, 52 lap race. I'm not great with maths, but yeah, that is the limit of the tyres. The teams took that gamble, and I suppose with the safety car period, they thought they'd get away with it, but obviously they wouldn't. But yeah, enough tyre talk, sort of. That is kind of the massive talking point of the weekend. You can see another picture on screen there, Alex Albon and Kevin Magnussen. That was supposed to come up later. Never mind. We'll do that in a bit. But Max Verstappen, so frustrated. So was Christian Horner, but they kind of felt like they were in an impossible situation. First of all, they weren't to know that Mercedes were going to have those problems. They also weren't sure if Max's tyres would get to the end, so they erred on the side of caution after Bottas's problems. I think that was the right call at the time. Looking back, though, Max Verstappen wins that race if he doesn't pit, and I think there's a lot of frustration at Red Bull. But again, like I say, I think they did the right thing at the time they made that call. Because if they don't know those tyres are getting to the end, they can't risk a massive blow up, and at the end of the day, 18 points is better than what would have been none if that tyre had let go. I think they'll look at that. I think they will look at that this weekend and go, that's better than we expected, and we did the right thing at the time.
Yeah, definitely. They were, until a few laps to go, they were not looking at second place at all. And you've got to make strategic decisions at the time you're making them. You can never make them with hindsight. And we don't know yet, because they'll take that tyre, they'll take Verstappen's hard tyres away and analyse them and work with Pirelli, and maybe they won't have lasted. Maybe he would have had the same problems. I'm going to shut my window in a minute.
It's all right.
Noises. Yeah, we don't know if he would have had the same problems as anyone else. So yeah, they bagged fastest lap. They bagged an extra point, an extra position on the podium. And yeah, good weekend for them. Yes, there was a chance they would have beaten Hamilton if they hadn't stopped, and there will always be an element of kicking themselves for not doing that. But you don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 laps, the next 50 laps. You don't know. You have to make the best decision you can at the time.
Yeah, and it was the right call at the time. I think a lot of people in chat agreeing with that one, or I say a lot, I think I've seen two. Two's a lot to me, all right? Yeah, so I think, yeah, right call at the right time. Not really much to say on that one from Red Bull, but I think they'll be happy with that result. 18 points, keeps them second in the Constructors, or puts them second. Were they second anyway? I think they were, but keeps them second in the Constructors, which is where they're going to be this season. Max Verstappen, though, he was so bored at one point in that race. It was even asking his engineer if he'd had a drink or making sure his engineer was having a drink. So I quite like that one, but I think that's the kind of season Max Verstappen's going to have, to be honest, where he is going to be, you're going to have the Mercedes disappearing up front and winning the race and dominating the championship. I don't think anybody's quick enough to challenge Verstappen and Red Bull. So I think he's going to spend a lot of weekends in probably third place, 25 seconds off the lead, 25 seconds clear of anybody else. So I hope he don't get too frustrated. But if we get some more radio gold like that, I'm perfectly happy for Max Verstappen to be trundling around in third place. Few of them this weekend.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's what Verstappen's where he's going to be placed. But he does have to just make sure he's well positioned to take advantage of anything that might happen. For example, if there's a safety car towards the end of the race, and he's got to make sure his tyres are in tip-top position so he can, maybe make an overtake off the restart or just be ready for anything to happen ahead of him. I think he's just got to be well positioned. And there may be a couple of tracks that, come back to Red Bull. Maybe not. We've got a few tracks we haven't seen in a long time, if ever, coming up this season. So yeah, there may be some jokers dealt him at some point.
Imola might be quite handy for them.
If they get ahead of Imola, no one's getting past him. So
yeah. Maybe. Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just a shame from a Red Bull point of view. There isn't a Monaco. There isn't. There aren't the tracks like Mexico that they can really excel at this year. So it'll be a frustrating year. But I completely agree. Keep himself in that second, third place, and if something goes wrong, he's there to pick up the pieces and get himself a win. I think he will win a race this year. I don't think Merc are going to win them all. Call me naive again if you like, but I think there's plenty of twists and turns to come. We saw in that first race in Austria, anything can happen. We've seen in those last 3 laps, anything can happen. So, yeah, and as they keep saying on Sky, it's a great reminder that you should never give up on F1 and you should always watch all the way to the end, which is all well and good, but when you've got a fan base that fell asleep on lap 13, you've got to make sure that, which I think is why Crofty shouts a lot, to wake people up in those final 10 laps. I think that's why he shouts a lot. I had my headphones on when I was watching today. I had to turn my volume down because that first lap he was absolutely screaming. I was like, Crofty, your blood pressure, mate. Calm down. Charles Leclerc on screen there. I put it on Twitter. I think he's had a really strong weekend. That Ferrari, people pointing out Vettel seems to have the worst of the 2 Ferraris, and I tend to agree with that one. But then again, if your driver's leaving, which driver are you going to back? The one that's on a 3-4 year contract or the one that's disappeared at the end of the year? So anyway, we're not getting to that today, but I think Leclerc definitely has the better Ferrari, but it's not a great car by any stretch. I would argue it's not even a top 3 car, but he managed to qualify 4th yesterday and get it 3rd place today in the race. I know some luck at the end there, but he was quite happy in 4th place all Grand Prix, and I've been quite impressed with him. I think that just shows that maybe that Ferrari power unit did flatter him a little bit, let's put it that way, last year, but I think that just shows that he has got the talent to get some very good results out of a disappointing car, which is actually a sign of a extremely good driver.
Yeah, he's had a very solid weekend, and to the point where he was kind of anonymous. Like, I didn't really notice him that much. He was just getting on with it. I think partly because he is also in a sort of in a gap between, well, the Red Bull ahead of him and the sort of fighting pack behind him. He managed to get himself in the gap where he didn't really see many people this weekend, apart from having a few scraps in the opening laps. Yeah, I think he did well this weekend, and actually, and I'm sure we'll get to Vettel at the time comes. This is kind of the strongest I've seen Ferrari this year. They look to have some genuine pace underneath Leclerc, at least. And this could be the start of turning it around for them. We know they've got the resources more than quite a lot of other teams to just keep developing through the year and eking out performance. So even though they started off bad, we could well see a much better Ferrari by the end of the season, and this could be part of their push forward. No idea why we only saw it with Charles this weekend, but this gives me some optimism. They'll sort of get stuck in there.
I think you had a similar conversation with Jonty on Twitter. I don't believe Ferrari are deliberately sabotaging Vettel, because I agree with you. I'm sure it was your point about how, they need to be working together and getting the best results they can.
Yeah.
But I do agree with Jonty that something's not quite right there. Vettel is not that bad a driver, and he's not that far off his teammate. I do not believe that. I'm not saying it's sabotage, but I think that, as I've already sort of touched on, it's probably more a case that Ferrari is saying, well, look, you're leaving next year, so if we've got updates, if we can do something to the car, we're going to give them to Charles first. You're going to have to wait. And I think that's probably more what's going on than anything there. But really concerning that they're talking about 2022 as their next chance to start winning races, and they had no chance of a podium this weekend. And then there you go, they're there to pick up the pieces. And I know, again, look at the end, but he was solidly fourth. So he was, again, like Verstappen, in the running for if something went wrong. So I was surprised, because I thought they were going to struggle this weekend, because Silverstone is very much a power track, and they've really delivered with Charles Leclerc there, and I think he'd be very, very happy with that result. But I'm maybe not quite as optimistic as you, or hopeful as you, Stuart, about them turning this around, or this being the start. I think they've got some difficult tracks coming up. Spain, Mercedes all the way there, as we know, and then you've got big power tracks like Spa and Monza, and I think they're going to really struggle there. But we'll see. I want to see. We want Ferrari up there. We want Red Bull up there. We want all of them up there challenging. But we certainly want to see Ferrari and Red Bull as close as possible. And hopefully they can turn this around, because, of course, these cars are frozen predominantly for next year, aren't they? So if Ferrari are terrible this year, they might be bad next year rather than terrible. But they're not going to be fighting for world championships anytime soon. So hopefully we'll get to see a bit more. But I'm not quite as optimistic, if I'm being honest. Sorry, Ferrari fans.
I mean, I don't think I'm expecting them to be back at 2019
No.
levels by the end of this year, but I don't know. Could they get back to being the third best team by the end of the year? It's hard to say. I mean,
They've got the money.
Yeah, they have got the money. The what we previously called the sort of the battle for fourth place is now moved up to the battle for third place, and they've got some competition on their hands now if they want to get themselves there. But they are getting podiums. They do have a sort of weird consistency where they don't take each other out. They are sort of roughly there-ish on race day sometimes. Ish.
I'll do the super chats in a minute for that little top three conversation there, but I do just want to put a question to you guys in chat as well, and to you, Stuart. I think both titles are going to Mercedes. I don't want to say this after 4 races, but I think with a 30-point lead, it's Hamilton's to lose, which some might argue he was in that position anyway. But I do just want to ask this question. Is this more dominant, or does it feel more dominant than that 2014? Because 2014, they were gone. They were so far clear. Is this a more dominant year, do you feel? Or do you just feel that it's only 4 races, Sean, shut up. Stop being so melodramatic.
It certainly. It's hard to cast it back to 2014. 2014 was
more than a week ago.
Yeah. In terms of pace, it does. It just feels like no one can get near them. But that was the case at the beginning of 2014 as well. It took a long time for anyone to sort of even vaguely challenge them. They are making a few more mistakes. Like we're not seeing 1-2s every race for one reason or another. There's just that big gap, and I think Ferrari being out of the picture is compounding that as well, because essentially, we'll get to him, because Albon is not delivering at the same level as Verstappen. It's sort of Hamilton, Bottas. Verstappen is, you can see him in the distance, and then that's kind of it. And then there's like a whole other race happening beneath that. So they do kind of feel more like they're on their own than they have done.
Yeah, it feels very much, doesn't it? Mercedes, gap, Red Bull, gap, everybody else. It's kind of how it feels. So I think what it is they've taken a step forward, and everybody else, or certainly Red Bull and Ferrari, have taken at least 1 step back, it feels like. So obviously that's effectively 2 steps forward for Mercedes, isn't it? So yeah, it feels more dominant. And I remember back in 2014, I'll very quickly say this, always, not that I'm against Mercedes, but always hoping something would happen that would mix it up like a Spain 2016, as we saw. Of course, was it Canada that year where they had their brake issues and that allowed Daniel Ricciardo to get his first win? Always waiting for something like that to happen to spice things up a little bit. So, yeah, but as we said right at the top, I'm not going to attack Mercedes over that. They are a coherent and capable team is what I wrote down. Coherent and capable team. It's up to everybody else to make sure that they're coherent and capable and build a car that can challenge. So, yeah, Red Bull and Ferrari, step it up. Otherwise, this is going to be a very easy year for Mercedes, although I'm sure Toto Wolff would hate anybody saying it's easy, because I'd imagine it's still quite stressful, even with your two drivers out front, as we saw today. Daniel Ricciardo, 4th place today, and a really good showing this weekend for Renault. Esteban Ocon in 6th, but I really enjoyed, I know, talking about how things are a bit predictable at the front apart from those last few laps, but in behind there are so many changes weekend on weekend. I really enjoyed watching that Renault and McLaren scrap today, and I am absolutely adamant that when Norris, Sainz and Ricciardo were fighting, there was some team play there from McLaren to box Ricciardo in to get the other car ahead. I'm so sure there was some team play there. It just all looked so convenient. I loved that. Some really good aggressive scrapping, and it's that midfield, it's that battle between Renault and McLaren. What are Racing Point going to do that's keeping this season alive for a lot of people? And they delivered today. Again, I hate saying midfield because it is basically the rest of the grid, isn't it? But I think Renault and McLaren, I just want to see Ricciardo, Norris, Sainz and Ocon going head-to-head every weekend. I love it.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad they're so closely matched, both in terms of driver skill and the car that's underneath them, and we're sort of seeing them come together every race. I'm actually this is Renault's best showing of the year. They had a bit of a dodgy 2019, and now they're definitely just got the momentum, because it did kind of look like McLaren was sort of going to run away with that best of the rest spot, but Renault aren't, well, I say McLaren, but Racing Point were there, but we weren't considering Renault as much the first few races of the season, and now
Had
they're
a slow start, didn't they?
Yeah, they're saying don't forget us, and we, and our protest against Racing Point might not hold water, so we better get some actual real points on the table. Yeah, it was good fun. I can't speak to whether or not McLaren were doing some canny teamwork or whether Norris was just keeping his eye on the perfect moment to pounce, but that was a great maneuver. And actually, I'm just genuinely excited to see Renault up amongst it. Very strange absence of Racing Point this week compared to previous races, so we'll have to keep our eye on how they do. Obviously, they were a driver down, but seeing as they got another shot at Britain next week, it'd be interesting to see if they can do something different.
I thought they'd be comfortably the second best team, because this is a Mercedes track and that is last year's Mercedes. I thought it would be a shoe-in for Stroll today for a podium, and he was nowhere. P9 in the end. I know the safety car messed up his strategy early on because he would have gone a lot further on those tyres, but it's kind of the same for everybody, wasn't it? Mercedes, the tyres blew up at the end, so it did affect them, but you know what I mean? They still managed to go off and win it. So I thought Stroll would do more. And I know that this was pointed out on Twitter that, Perez would have had Hülkenberg's car, or whatever, would have been in that car and it might not have made the start. But I really do believe that Racing Point missed Perez today. I think if he's in that car and he can take the start, he's knocking on the doors of a podium today. Nothing against Stroll. I just think Perez is a better driver, and I think he would have been knocking on the doors of the podium.
Yeah, I think he would have been fully entrenched in that Renault-McLaren battle that we were talking about before. Again, we can only speculate where he would have been. Hülkenberg did a good job stepping into his seat, but obviously without the practice and being out of the car and not even being involved in simulator work for the whole year, he was obviously going to have a harder time of it than Perez. And even actually his neck was not up to scratch for taking on the high G corners, and he was complaining about, because he couldn't support his own neck, he was hitting his head across the little bobbles in the headrest. So tricky weekend for them. I know we've seen some good stuff from Stroll the last few races, and we're hoping to see even more of him. But you're right, Perez is a better driver and would have been more among it. And we'll never know where he would have finished this week.
No, and despite his absence, still clear of Stroll in the championship, 2 points ahead of him. So, yeah, that's one opportunity gone. I suspect that Hulkenberg will be in the car next weekend as well. I think we're still waiting for official confirmation, but the UK guidelines, I was going to say, are pretty clear, but that would just be a blatant lie. The UK guidelines are what they are, and I think F1 have put a mandatory 10-day thing on him as well. That's unconfirmed. Do not quote me on that, for God's sake. That is unconfirmed, but I believe F1 have said no, it's 10 days. But Sandro in chat says Stroll was fighting Ricciardo and Ocon for most of the race, then suddenly lost a huge amount of pace in the last 10 to 15 laps. He was absolutely involved in that fight. I just thought he would have been ahead of that fight and gone. I was expecting that in the Racing Point this weekend. Maybe that drop off in the last 10 to 15 laps was concerns over his tyres. That I haven't had the press releases yet. I'll have a check for you in a moment. But maybe that's one of the concerns. He had to back off a little bit and save some tyres. But yeah, disappointing for Stroll. And just a word on Hulkenberg actually before we talk about sort of the rest of the grid. It's kind of the Hulkenberg story, wasn't it? It's just loses his seat at the end of last year. Perez catches COVID. He gets the opportunity to come back. Does okay, gets a numb ass cheek, and then ends up not being able to take the start when everyone's expecting him to deliver in a car that is capable of securing a podium. I mean, it couldn't be any more Hulkenberg this weekend, could it? The only way it can be any more Hulkenberg is if next weekend he goes on and finishes second or something like that, and then Renault go and win their protest and it gets taken away from him. But it was good to see him back. It really was, and I think I said on Friday, I think he was the best option at short notice. But I'm absolutely gutted that he couldn't race this weekend. And I think he did an okay job given the short notice of it all, and he was definitely getting quicker as the weekend went on. Not great in quali, but I think putting a driver like Hulkenberg, who's just come back after so long out, which is actually only 3 races, by the way, but after so long out, to try and go for a medium tyre lap in Q2 was a little bit risky, and they probably should have just gone immediately to softs and got him through on a banker and then played the strategy from there. But I don't think he was terrible. I think he did a good job, all things considered. I mean, what was it? 4:30 Thursday evening. He was told that he might be in the car, and then he's in the simulator at 8 o'clock the next morning and having a seat fitting, and it's wow.
Yeah, I mean, my heart breaks for the team and for Hulkenberg.
Yeah.
If you listen to Otmar talking about all the steps they had to go through to even get him in the seat, including making sure he had a super license, which goes through the contract recognition board, and then getting him fitted, getting him as prepped as possible, getting him tested so he could enter the bubble. That's even before he's got in the car and done some laps. And he's only missed 3 rounds, but that's races, qualifying,
testing,
4 hours of free practice, and 6 days of testing, plus however much time between the beginning of the year and now that the drivers spend in the simulator working with engineers. The rest of the grid is at a completely different place than Hulkenberg is, even though he is an experienced F1 driver. So I think he did a pretty okay job in qualifying, and it was just a shame. It was a shame, like just a silly problem. I'm not even entirely sure what the official problem was, but just not being able to get his car started just seems like the most pathetically absurd thing that could have happened, But hopefully he'll get. I say hopefully, I mean poor Perez, but hopefully he'll get another chance next week. There is some news in on Grosjean, by the way. But,
yes. I've got some bigger breaking news before that though.
Oh wow! Okay.
I mean,
exciting.
This is huge. Everybody, strap yourselves in. This will shock you to your core. Renault have lodged an official protest against Racing Point and the legality of their car this weekend. Ooh. Yes, and Grosjean has got away with a warning for his weaving and swerving and blocking and, reasonable, do you think? Would a penalty have been a bit harsh on that? He got the black and white flag, so he'd been warned. Maybe the point of the black and white flag is effectively like in football, that's your yellow card. Maybe should have got a penalty for some of those moves, or is a warning enough for you, Stuart? He was right on the line with them, wasn't he? In fact, he was over the line with more than one of them.
It's one of those things where I'm like, where it seems like getting warned seems not enough, but getting a penalty seems too much. And I know they can give out a 5-second penalty now, and he ended up 16th anyway, so it wouldn't really have mattered. So maybe giving him a 5-second, 10-second penalty. Maybe giving him one of the smaller time penalties would have been a good idea because it wouldn't have taken away a good result from him, but it would have served as a sort of general warning to all the drivers, including Grosjean, that not to dart across the track in a braking zone. And I think Weber summed it up because I was watching Channel 4 this, so Weber summed it up quite well in that it seems like he's on a different page than the other drivers when it comes to what's the accepted etiquette in a braking zone.
And it's on the GPDA, which is
And
terrifying.
yes, so it was like like a few years ago, there was Verstappen did a lot of moving around in the braking zone, and that was all clarified. Don't do that, and Grosjean seems to have not kind of got that memo because when you're braking, especially in a hard braking zone, like that he was in, everyone's going high speed. You can't once you're the other car and you sort of committed to what you're going to do under braking, you can't back out of it that easily. You're in a bit of a commitment to how fast you're going, which direction you're pointing the car in, and if Grosjean decides to kind of move across you at the last minute, it can be really dangerous. So yeah, let's hope he doesn't do that again.
I love Grosjean. He gives
I
us
know.
so much
I don't want to
about.
wail on him.
He's so lovely. I've just noticed something. The date today is the 2nd of August. Renault, on Renault's Twitter feed, they've just retweeted their tweet from last week confirming or the other week from confirming their protest. July 19th, they've retweeted. We confirm that Renault team has submitted a request to the stewards of the event for clarification, blah, blah, blah. So they're not even bothered. It's just a bloody retweet.
They're like, yeah. If copying's allowed, then we'll copy ourselves.
I bet that's a sly dig as well. The Renault and Racing Point social media guys are brilliant. So I wonder if that is a little bit of a shot. But anyway, Alexander Albon, I'll come to Pierre Gasly in a moment. What word? Rotten. Rotten weekend. Crash in FP2 and then reliability problems in FP3 and only got 14 minutes in there. Qualifying, not great. P12, that's a knock-on effect from not a lot of track time, of course. And then into the race and it just all... I mean, on the face of it, 8th place is a good recovery, given that he ended up at 1 point with all sorts of trouble down in last. It's not an awful recovery, or what felt like last anyway, but not a good weekend for Albon, and a lot of pressure on him. And a lot of people starting to sort of ask the question now, certainly Sky were, whether or not it's time to look elsewhere. First of all, who? I mean, who the hell are Red Bull going to look for? They've already dropped everybody else. I mean, Kvyat or Gaz, is it Kvyat's turn this week? I just think, there's nobody to step up. They've got to get behind a driver at some point and start to give them what they need. But he's not been good this weekend, Albon. I can't defend him. Maybe other people will. The move on Magnussen, my initial thought was penalty. I look at replays. The gap is there. There's no doubt about that. He is at 1 point halfway at least alongside. Magnussen does turn in, but I think it's the fact that it's not a conventional overtaking place that makes that probably a penalty, which is weird. It's weird. I think didn't the stewards say that? An unconventional overtaking place, and that's why, not the reason why they're given a penalty, but why that accident has happened, and so they've given Albon that penalty. But it feels a little bit harsh, but at the same time, his bold move ruined Magnussen's day. So I can see why the penalty was given, but it's another one of those. We had one, was it possibly the Hamilton-Albon one again? Poor Alex Albon. Where it's one of those where you understand why the penalty's given, but you'd also understand if it was given as a racing incident.
Yeah, it's tricky, and it's definitely got to be more on Albon than anyone else.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was kind of alongside, and Magnussen. It happened at the apex during at quite a wide track. Magnussen had a lot more track available to him, but probably didn't expect Albon to just still be there at the apex of the corner when he turned in. And just a big shame, really. I can see why it was only a small penalty rather than something like serious. But if I was Albon, I would have thought that Magnussen turned in on me because he was just taking the corner from where he was and not giving up the position. But yeah, I think you're right. Just it's a strange place for it to happen. Just a very weird kind of accident. maybe it's just I'm quite glad to see Albon on the other side of it for once. His car was intact. He didn't spin off the track. He got to keep going. He got to experience that side of being in an accident. So, good for him.
Here we go. Passes at turn 18 are unusual and difficult to execute. While Albon appeared to be the faster car, the stewards determined that he attempted the pass too late and the gap on the inside of the car, Magnussen, was always going to diminish. So they've been listening to Martin Brundle. It's a gap that's always going to disappear. So they've obviously gone with that one, and they've said that it was a late move as well. So, like I say, it's one of those that you understand the penalty, but you also think you'd kind of accept it if it had been a racing incident as well. But I don't know. I think, yeah, I'd maybe lean towards penalty. If the stewards felt that was a late move, I really wish I could show footage on these streams because I'd be streaming it to you right now just to show you. But yeah, I just maybe lean more towards a penalty, but I think it's very close to a 50-50. Maybe benefit of the doubt could have been given, but stewards don't work like that, because if that had been Verstappen on Gasly, probably people would be screaming for a penalty and, oh, look at Max Verstappen doing that again. So, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be one of those that people interpret their own ways and argue over for weeks. And I say weeks, I mean like an hour, and then they'll forget about it and move on to the next one. But, yeah, I'm concerned for him. People are saying, oh, why do we always have to debate Albon? It's because we know what Helmut Marko is like. He will get rid of him at the first opportunity if somebody else comes along if he's not happy with him. Christian Horner can defend him all he wants. If Marko and Massachusetts decide they've had enough of him, he's gone. End of. So I think he needs to get closer to Verstappen on a Saturday, and he needs to start delivering the races, and just maybe another sign as well of just not having enough patience. We've seen it a couple of times this season, but it's so bizarre. And I know everyone says this, and it's almost becoming a cliche now, but if he doesn't have the incident with Hamilton in Brazil, it's a podium. If he doesn't have the incident in Austria with Hamilton, it's a podium. He had tyre issues in Hungary, still finished fourth, a long way off his teammate, but it's still fourth, and that's where he needs to be. If Verstappen is second or third, Albon needs to be third or fourth. It's as simple as that. So he's kind of, in that respect, I think it's really, I suppose, yeah, going to cliches, the points tally don't tell the full story with Albon, do they?
Yeah, no. And I mean, you're right about Marco. I actually, we haven't heard a lot from him at the moment.
Which is always a concern.
Give him time. Obviously, Albon has just punted someone off the track, but we know full well that Red Bull are running out of drivers that aren't Verstappen to pick from. The three drivers currently on the track are ones they've already used. So, whoever they pick is going to have to be someone they've already chucked out of the main team.
I don't know. I hear there's a Mexican might be an available driver for next year.
Well, for next year, sure. But, Red Bull don't wait that long. Red Bull don't wait till the end of a season to change their drivers if they're unhappy.
Damn my naivety.
Yeah. And Albon, Red Bull drivers certainly don't have the relationship that, say, Grosjean does with Haas, where it doesn't really matter what you do. You're in for next year, mate. I'm trying not to be worried about him because he is a quick driver and he has shown speed and he has shown skill, and there's clearly a gap between Verstappen and other drivers. He's a very, very quick driver, and I do think Red Bull are clearly centering the operation around Max, which leaves the second car somewhat exposed to things that happen. Verstappen himself does get into incidents, but he is more consistent with his speed. So I'm hoping Albon can have a run of just better races where he can at least show he's just bringing points in, doing what they need from that second car, so that he can come off him a little bit. That would be good to see.
Out-qualified by Pierre Gasly and beaten in the race by him today. I know there were extra pit stop for Albon, but still beaten by the guy that he replaced is not going to go down well with Mr. Marko, or sorry, Dr. Marko in his evil lair. There's no way he's going to be very happy with that one. But I think that also highlights what we all keep talking about, and that is that team and that car is built for one man, and it's Max Verstappen. And Gasly could not drive that car very well. Albon, I believe, is doing better than Gasly, but still not really doing an amazing job. Obviously, again, those issues with the almost getting podiums aside, I think this is just evidence that Red Bull are going to have to accept that whoever they have in that second car is not going to be on the pace of Verstappen, because that's not a car built for them. Look at what Gasly's doing for AlphaTauri. That he's got back in that car and he's nailing it, because it's not a car focused on one driver. It's a car that he can have a say in, and it suits his driving style more. So I think that's so important to remember. And I really hope they're going to have some patience with Alex Albon. But my problem is, and my fear is, when was the last time Red Bull were patient with a driver? Do you know, actually, I'd argue Max Verstappen. Sorry, Verstappen fans, he did not have a very wonderful start to 2018, did he? He was crashing quite a lot. But I mean, he's a completely different level, isn't he, of driver? So I'm just trying to think of the last time they were properly patient with a driver. They weren't with Gasly. He had 12 races. Albon's had 12 or 13 now, so that's another reason I'm concerned. Webber, can't really compare that. Vettel, he stuck around, didn't he, until he'd had enough and he went, so no issues there with patience.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the number one driver in the team, that, you know, they'll keep you around. I think Vettel and Verstappen are sort of a different, not in the conversation, because they're the drivers that they're the adored sons. Although it would be interesting to see if Verstappen hadn't got that win straight off the bat in 2016 and had taken more time to sort of get on top of things, what Red Bull would have done with him. You'd assume they would have kept him on, but he was brought in just as a replacement halfway through the season in their Red Bull Toro Rosso merry-go-round. You know, in not properly developing all their drivers, they may well be missing out on some real talent that's just waiting to be sort of honed and shined.
Yeah, absolutely. And really impressed with Gasly again this weekend. 7th place. Was, even before the tyre issues, was looking at a top 10. I think he's kind of... I don't want to speculate and talk about driver transfers because it's a race reaction, but he got dropped and it would have been so easy for him to sulk and be crap and throw his toys out his pram, and he hasn't. He's gone back to Toro Rosso then, but AlphaTauri now, got his head down, got on with it, and frankly, he's battering Kvyat. I know, very unlucky Kvyat today with whatever happened to his car, which resulted in the accident, but I just can't fault Gasly at the moment.
No.
Sorry, I've just had a press release from... I was looking to see if there's anything on Daniel Kvyat's tyre. Sorry. Live on air.
Daniel Kvyat. Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah, Daniel. Yeah, I mean, Gasly, he's doing a good job. But as soon as he went back to, what's now AlphaTauri, he just was happier and was able to just show himself to the fullest. And I'm really glad for him. I don't really know where he goes from here, because I'm guessing at some point he's going to have to kind of break away from the Red Bull family if he wants to, you know, move up the grid into a better team than AlphaTauri. Nothing against them, but yeah, I'm glad, and I'm glad we're seeing the Gasly that we sort of knew existed before he was just pummeled into the ground by Red Bull.
Kvyat says, he says, all of a sudden at turn 10, I lost the rear of the car. I thought it was my fault at first. I always tend to blame myself. Bless him. Says, but after reviewing the video, we saw that something happened out of my control, so we will need to check all the data to understand what exactly caused the failure. So Toro Rosso, it was coming, wasn't it? AlphaTauri there confirming that there was something wrong on the car which caused the incident. I couldn't imagine that he dropped the rear there. He was quite angry when he got out of the car, but I think the most important thing is, you know, a few people unhappy with the way he was with the camera, but at the end of the day, he was angry, he was frustrated, but the most important thing there is that he got out, because it was a big accident, and Magnussen Beckett's is a huge place. You know, if you're going off at Magnussen Beckett's towards a wall, it's going to be a biggie, and it was a biggie. So it looks like a failure for Kvyat. Obviously, we'll get more information, usually sort of by the time we get to the press conference on Thursday, we tend to hear more. So he's okay, which is important, and hopefully he'll have a better weekend next time. But yeah, I can understand why he might have thought it was himself, but even on the replay, when you're watching the replays, the car sort of, it drops at the right rear, doesn't it, before he loses the back end, and then the rear end goes round and he's into the wall. So it's quite obvious looking at it that it's a failure, but obviously he's in the cockpit, he's not going to see that or know that.
Yeah, I was surprised when he just immediately seemed to throw his hands up and say, "Sorry, it's my fault." That was, I would have thought he would have felt the car just misbehaving, even if I don't know, even if he felt the rear snap away, I would have assumed he would have said something funny, something about that, like the car just went, but he just seemed to throw his hands up straight away and say, "Sorry, that was um, my fault completely." Very weird, but definitely looked like a failure to me. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a weird place to lose it as well, or an unusual place to lose it. So I think that's why it was weird anyway. But who haven't we talked about? We talked about Racing Point. We've done McLaren and Renault. We talked about Science with all the tyre stuff. We've talked about Vettel. Obviously talked about Bottas. Let's go. We've talked about Grosjean. We've got Alfa Romeo. I think Alfa Romeo and Williams are the last two.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, well, maybe before Alfa Romeo. I just want to say, like, Russell just doing a good job coming
Yeah,
in 12th again, just there, just drive. I mean, he got into Q2 again, didn't he?
was that
Like,
3 weekends in a row?
yeah, and on a dry, normal racing qualifying weekend, just whatever's in that Williams to get, he's finding it. And I've said it before, but I'm just so glad he is drawing attention to himself, because we'd seen him, pre F1 and the speed he had, and then he got um, sat in a Williams that was not able to sort of demonstrate the talent of anyone who was sitting in it. And now he's able to actually just show people what he's got. And he's in Williams for another year after this, but I'm really impressed with him. I'm really glad we're getting to see this from him.
Yeah, they don't seem to have the race pace at the minute, Williams. So it's a sort of they have that 1 lap pace, which is great to see. Obviously, the driver can make quite a bit of difference over 1 lap, can't they? Whereas on race, maybe not. But I think what I'm liking about Russell is, and Latifi as well. I know I said on Twitter, didn't I? He likes to spin a lot, does Latifi? It feels that way. He always seems to be going round. But I think what they are doing is trying to make sure that they are there to pick up the pieces. We almost saw points in that first race in Austria. I guess you could say we almost saw points today, P12, with everything going on. A couple more laps and he would have been in the points, I think, because Hamilton would have had to stop and less time for him to get back, and maybe we'd have seen some other tyre failures. But I think that's what Williams have got to do. I don't think if you have 20 cars finishing the race, I don't think they're going to be knocking on the door of points. But if you get retirements, you get a lucky safety car or tyre failures, anything like that, they need to just make sure they were finishing the races and being there for if things go wrong. But I think P12 a really good result, and he's had a very good weekend. And I think Nicholas Latifi, yeah, he's spinning a lot. Bless. He's not really on the pace of Russell, but I don't think he's been absolutely diabolical in these first 4 races. A lot of people thought he was going to be terrible, but he's not been. I can't honestly say I've sat and looked at Latifi and gone, wow, that's a driver. But at the same time, I've not gone, well, he's absolutely awful. I think he's doing all right. 11th place as well, was it, in Austria? So ahead of Russell in the championship at the minute, I believe. I will check that.
Oh, that's a good stat. That's a good stat if you're right. I didn't even think about that at all. But yeah, I think you're right. I definitely. There you go. Once again, Russell being shafted by one good result from his teammate. Yeah, and I think, no disrespect to Kubica, but I think Latifi is a much sort of more solid driver pairing with Russell. And together, I think they are working with Williams to really develop that car and get that team back on top. I've listened to Claire Williams talking about it earlier in the weekend and how much, well, both the drivers, he did speak about like Russell in particular, but are working with the engineers on developing that team and using the simulators and feeding back, and how much of an asset they are, beyond sitting in the car on a Friday to Sunday and bringing home, well, not points yet, but at least one race, there's going to be at least some points on the board. Yeah, I'm impressed and relieved. Relieved, yeah. Sean.
Yes, definitely. And I think like a point there, sort of going back to what I was saying earlier about Red Bull and their jokers, we've got quite a few tracks that either haven't been on the calendar for a while or haven't been on the calendar before. So Mugello and Portimao, that's a level playing field in terms of data. Nobody has any information. Ferrari probably a bit on Mugello, obviously, but then you've got the Nürburgring, not been there for a long time, and it's going to be ice cold as well. Some people talk about snow. That's a possibility. Yes, please. Get them snow tyres out. Why not? And then you've got Imola. Well, yeah, we used to race at Imola a lot, but not since 2006 that they've raced at Imola, something around there. So any data they have from 2006 is completely irrelevant. So races like that could be a good opportunity for Williams to pick up a point or to get a really good result, because there is going to be that level playing field between them, Haas and Alfa, and probably some of the others ahead of them as well. So I think that they've got opportunities this year, Williams, but I'm with you. I'm so relieved, and it's so good to see them doing, I'd say, well. I mean, if you compare it to where they were last year, we'd be talking right now at the end of the stream of Williams being 5 laps down on the rest of the field. And they're not, yeah, all right, Latifi was last time out, but it's not every weekend. They're not getting absolutely hammered. And I think that's a good sign. And they're very much in that fight with Haas and Alfa Romeo. And I would argue they are probably ahead of Alfa Romeo on raw pace. I do not know. Well, I do know what's going on, Ferrari engine. But that car, Alfa Romeo, Haas are kind of where they were. Ferrari have taken a couple of steps back. It feels like Alfa Romeo have taken 2 or 3 steps back as well. And I mean, the rumour is at the moment Kimi is set to announce his retirement. That is the rumour from this weekend. He's apparently either telling the team this weekend or he plans to tell the team before the next weekend that he's going to retire. Again, that is just rumour, speculation. But I can't see that he wants to stick around at Alfa Romeo driving around for P20 and P19, or what was it today, P17. Obviously, front wing failure. Was it a failure on the front wing for Kimi today? Or did he hit a curb a bit? I can't remember.
I actually never got to the bottom of that. Maybe chat will know, because they've probably been following information as we've been chatting away. Because it either looked like he kind of lost it and then bumped over a curb, or whether the front wing failed, which caused him to go wide over a curb. I mean, either way, it was a miserable race before he even got to that point. He looked awfully slow before then. And I totally agree with you. I think at least this weekend, they were the worst team out there. Particularly, weirdly, under Kimi's control.
Yeah, and it's chat just saying there it was a front wing failure. So, yeah, that would make sense. But I think it's a stark reminder as well that whilst they have a very nice name in Alfa Romeo, they are still Sauber under all of that. And that is, I hate saying it, but being towards the back end of the grid is what we've come to expect from Sauber for so long. They are the same team. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm worried. I expected more. I didn't think we were talking about Alfa Romeo as top of the midfield, but I remember not the testing just gone, but the 2019 testing, we were talking about Alfa Romeo as dark horses, and that never really came to anything. And they've continued to go backwards, and I can't remember what the stat is. I'm going to go and have a look now, but I think they've only had 1 points finish. Apart from that, I don't want to say it, anomaly of Brazil, because again, you got to be there to capitalise on the luck and all of that. But apart from that, they've not exactly been picking up consistent points. In fact, that'll be 1 points finish. I forgot to even check what the race was. So they had the really good result in Brazil, didn't they? Which was 5th place for Giovinazzi, and Kimi Räikkönen was 4th.
Yeah.
Prior to that, they hadn't scored since Russia, and have they only had 1 points finish so far this year? So, whilst I expected more, it probably shouldn't be all that much of a surprise that they've fallen away the way they have, because it was kind of showing no signs towards the end of last year. But they were just nowhere this weekend, and they were nowhere last weekend, and I'm just a little bit baffled as to why. I expected a lot more from them this year, so I'd argue they are very much the last team on the grid. Obviously, Räikkönen frustrating and a bit unlucky with that front wing today, but it wasn't as if he was knocking on the door of points at all, was he? Giovinazzi, I actually would say as well, Giovinazzi doing a better job in that car than Räikkönen at the minute.
Yeah, he is. And as a driver who's sort of been, I don't know, a little bit anonymous so far in the year and a bit that he's been in that team.
Yeah.
He's been, driving fine, kind of what you'd expect from a low end team. We are seeing a bit more of him, and I don't know if that's because we're seeing a little bit less of Räikkönen. He is, 41 at the end of his career at the moment, which is fair enough. and perhaps last year they were, as a team, were flattered a little bit by the Ferrari engine that had more oomph in it for one reason or another. But also, let's not forget this is, you know, this is the old Sauber team, and most of the people there are still the old Sauber team. And nothing against Sauber, I love Sauber, but one year they'd be great, the next year they'd be nowhere, and you'd never really know what Sauber you're going to get from year to year. And maybe we're still seeing some of that, despite the slightly closer relationship with Ferrari. Maybe we're just not seeing a sort of consistent output year by year from them. And as just a lot of these teams, actually, we were discussing it with Ferrari in particular, but the car they're driving now, for the most part, will be the car they're driving right to the end of 2021.
Yeah.
So the small amount of development they can wring out of it this year, they've really got to find whatever they can, because if this is where Alfa Romeo are at now, this is where they're going to be till next December, and that's got to concern them a little bit.
Nicely timed from Alfa Romeo. Just sent their press release out with the driver quotes as well. I can finally confirm what I was speculating or talking about at the start. He did get a 5-second penalty at the end for a safety car infringement, which was speeding under the safety car, I believe, and that cost him 2 places. So the result on screen will show 14th, but he actually finished 16th. So Alfa Romeo today were 16th and 17th. Not good. And would you just back on Williams, I think I'd maybe even say that they possibly have the edge on Haas, or at least are a match for them, which we talk about people taking steps back, but that's an enormous step forward for Williams.
Yeah, I mean, their starting point, as the 2019 benchmark, kind of helped, but their leap forward was surely the best of any team this year. I can't speak to what they did. I'm really looking forward to the inside story of the sort of between year development. But whatever they discovered, whatever they found out, whoever they hired to figure out where they were going wrong and what they need to do to move forward, I think they've done a wonderful job. And I'm hoping this is the start of moving forward. And if not getting back to the ways that we're used to them being, winning and podiums on the regular, at least mixing it up with that really solid midfield where everyone but Mercedes and Red Bull seem to be converging at the moment. There's a lot of people in that kind of exciting competitive group, and probably not next year, but maybe soon we'll see Williams among that group.
Yeah, and actually a good point, sort of on perspective, I suppose, is Fat J says, when we talk about Williams, we have to consider that Haas and Alfa have made a worse, or have a worse engine this year. So they've taken, as we've already said, Haas are probably about where they were. Alfa have taken a step back. So maybe that's flattering Williams a little bit as well. So I do firmly believe that Williams have taken some very good steps forward, but maybe it looks like a massive step when actually it's maybe just a steady step, and it's other teams that have got a little bit worse. But I don't think that should take away from it, because, Alfa and Ferrari between them don't have a car good enough, and Williams have managed to get everything together to have a good car. So, yeah, but that's a very good point to bring some perspective to that. But yeah, I think, just super quickly, I don't know if you've read anything on it, Stuart, but do you think he'll go at the end of this year if that car doesn't improve massively? He's 106 now, to be fair, as well. So
it's really hard, until he says something. It's really hard to say, because I've been saying, "Oh, I think this is his last year" for years.
Does he ever say anything?
And he's still there. He's an unreadable person, because he doesn't say, "Oh, I've still got this great burning passion for racing." He must do, or he wouldn't do it, because that's Kimi. Kimi won't do a thing if he doesn't care about doing a thing. And maybe trundling around in 17th, waiting to get a front wing failure, isn't as fun as F1 was maybe last year, where he was sort of mixing it up with people. And maybe he wants to go back to doing, snow ski racing dressed as a gorilla, like he used to do. maybe he wants to go back to that again. But until he confirms it, it's completely unreadable. And if he signed on for another 2 years with Alfa Romeo, part of me wouldn't be surprised at all.
I think I go to the point he makes at the end of Drive to Survive Season 2, every stream is going to get bought up. And he says at the end something along the lines of, I don't care, it's my hobby. And I look at that, that is so Kimmy, and that is funny, and let's meme that and let's have a laugh. But if you don't care, let somebody else who does care have a go. Do you know what I mean? I love Kimmy, and I will miss him so much, because I won't miss that flipping advert, by the way. What's that about?
I hate it so much. Yeah, you're right.
I will miss him.
I mean, on your point, I agree, and this is becoming a bit of a bugbear for me, but I start, especially now I'm watching some of the junior formula and stuff, and I'm seeing all this talent that's bubbling up at the top, ready to move up, and seeing some drivers in F1 that just will not leave all these seats that could be filled with these young, exciting drivers. And I'm just like, yeah, I love you, Kimmy, but I'm ready. I'm ready for something different. There's a lot of hobbies out there.
Just on junior formula before I do super chats and get to drive of the day, massive. This will go down really well. It went down really well on Twitter. Huge shout out for Dan Tixham today, taking his first F2 win. I'm in the camp of 6 people that actually quite like Dan Tixham at the minute. I think he's matured massively. His drive today was superb. Yeah, what he did in 2015 was, if I'm being nice, stupid. I'll never forget that. I don't think anybody should ever forgive him for that, but everyone gets a shot at redemption, in my opinion. Everyone will always get a second chance, and he's got his head down. He served his punishment. He says some dumb stuff, but then I have a 100k YouTube channel out of saying dumb stuff, so it works for some people. He says some dumb stuff, but I don't think he's a bad lad. He's maturing, and his drive his drive today was a really, really solid drive. He's had a good start as well to this season, so I think real massive kudos to him for that. Also, just to the F2 boys and girls in general, because if it wasn't for them, I don't want to say it. This is the F1 word. I don't want to say it, but if it wasn't for them, there'd be some weekends where we don't really see a lot of action. So the F2 field, the F3 field, they keep us excited. So if you don't watch F2 and you don't watch F3, please do, if you can, because it is well worth the watch. Some excellent talent. Mick Schumacher, you already know about him. Robert Schwartzman, who I've taken to calling Bobby, much to my partner's hilarity for some reason. He's a hell of a talent. Dan Tixham's a quick guy. Guan Yu Zhou, absolutely huge talent as well. Christian Lundgaard. There are so many drivers. Callum Ilott as well. He doesn't get enough praise. And I said this last week, get Schwartzman and Schumacher and Ilott in Formula 1 next year. 1 in a Haas, 2 in an Alfa Romeo. That'll do. But then I quite like Gio as well, so I don't really want to lose him. But yeah, I don't know. So much talent in F2. That's all I'm going to say. Right, I'll do driver of the day first, and then we will do super chat. So in chat, you know the routine by now. One surname. Who is your driver of the day? Was it Hamilton got the official one? I believe. So definitely, yeah. I think deserved. So pop your driver of the day in the chat. I'll do super chats well in a minute. Stuart, who are you picking this week? I'll go in reverse order today.
Thanks. I'm looking down the field, and I'm like, to try and think of someone not Hamilton, and it's I mean, how can you? It was such a just all weekend, and to have an entire lap with 3 tyres in hand and still be able to win the race, I think is impressive. And actually, to keep up enough pace on 3 tyres to hold off what was Verstappen just a pit stop. I can't give it to anyone else. That was just stunning today.
Completely agree. That was my pick as well. So I'll have to pick somebody else, because I like to try and get some variation. But like you say, to be able to do that lap with 3 wheels and have the gap to everybody else. I know that Verstappen had his pit stop and that, but he still didn't. And, back to the penalty thing. Even if he got a penalty, it would have been 5 seconds. He would have still won the race by 8 tenths. So it's kind of pointless even having that conversation when I think back now. But for me, it would be Hamilton if I was picking officially. But because you've picked Hamilton, it looks like a lot of chat have. I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc. I'm going to go with Leclerc. Solid all day. Solid all weekend as well. Was there to bore off, Sean, was there to pick up the pieces when it all fell his way and get his luck and whatever that saying is I keep coming out with. So, yeah, I think Charles Leclerc for me.
Yeah, good pick. I'm laughing at LF Tipper in chat saying Hulkenberg didn't put a wheel wrong. Fair.
Actually, that's a good point, yeah. I'm a driver of the weekend. It's kind of pointless doing that because I think we'd probably all be going for a Hamilton or a Leclerc again, wouldn't we? So, yeah. Let's have a look what you guys are saying. I can guess this is going to be a good mix. I'm loving the Hulkenberg picks. He wasn't on the official vote, was he? Because he wasn't, because he would have won it. Because you know what that vote's all about. It's not anything to do with how people perform generally, is it? So, yeah. Leclerc for Enforcer Nebula. Gamer McLife says Lewis. Granny Annie says Ricardo. Jimmy Tran says Gasly. Gasly's a good shout.
Yeah.
Good shout for Gasly. Few say Hulkenberg. Ryan White says Hamilton. Mr. Random Guy says Ricardo. Lauren says Grosjean for keeping me awake. Yeah.
Fair.
And well, Crofty for keeping a lot of people awake if you were watching on Sky. And I was watching on Sky, by the way. I said this to Dylan, Zero X Fusion on Twitter. He's like, why are you watching on Sky when it's on Channel 4? Better commentary. It's like, I pay a fortune for Sky. If I pay for something, I'm using it. And I'm watching Sky, even if it pains me at times. I'm still going to watch it. That is who I am. Ricardo for Dev. Kieran says Hamilton. Is it Naldor says Hulkenberg? We got a lot of Hulkenberg in there. Hans says Leclerc. Kristen says Gasly. Gingerfest says Ricardo. Tyler Anderson says Albon. No, I can't agree with you on that one. I'm going to second guess that you're going for the fact that he had a pretty rough start and managed to get back to 8th place, but no, I like your optimism though. Yes, there it is. Next you says Norris. Yep. That helmet is so good. Oh, it's such a sweet story as well. Ricardo for Jack. Joshua says Ricardo as well. Another Jack says Hulk. Riley says Gasly. So if anybody's got anything else, if not Hamilton, then Gasly. That is Freeze014. Ricardo for Jack. Probably already read that because there's loads of Jacks here tonight. Why not? The Pirelli tyres, says Daniel Philpott. Of course. A good mix of them. Leclerc, obviously Hulkenberg, but Ricardo, Hamilton, and Gasly seem to be the ones that people are going for the most. There's a shout for Ocon there from Adam Osborne. P6, good weekend. He was actually a driver I wanted to see a better weekend from because he kind of underwhelmed me a little bit with his return, but obviously he's got to get up to speed, hasn't he? So, yeah, 6th place for Ocon. Some good battling as well. So I think that's a good shout too. But yeah, a good mix of people there. So I like that. I like to see that. Bit of debate, but I think it's very difficult not to say Hamilton, isn't it? Any driver that dominates a weekend like that, you've got to be, at the very least, considering them. But a couple of super chats. Justin says Williams is a full second faster than last year, though. Very good points. So thank you very much for your contribution, mate. Rocco says, how do the C1 failures for Hamilton, Bottas and Sainz and probable C2 failure of Kvyat combine with the underperformance of the C4 in Hungary for Leclerc? Thank you for your contribution. I'm going to be honest, without all the information sat in front of me, I really don't know how to answer that one. Massively appreciate the contribution, though. I'm trying to think how they might compare. I don't think you can. I mean, it's a softer compound of tyre. It's a completely different track. I don't think there would be any comparison, is what I'm going to go with there, or combine.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just deeping in black magic now.
Yeah. But yeah, I will ponder that. I love it when people put a question for me to just sit up all night pondering and reading up on. There'll be a video tomorrow now, like with that question as the title. You watch, it'll happen. Arzar says, thoughts on the C4 tyres lasting an entire lap in qualifying next week, considering discussion about saving the C3 tyres this week in Sector 1. Good point. Very good point. Thank you for your contribution. Obviously, a few teams were saving their tyres, weren't they, in Sector 1 in qualifying and then pushing for the rest of the lap, which is why we saw Ricciardo at one point purple and some other drivers getting purple first sectors. So if we are, I mean, first of all, we're talking about weather next weekend in the UK. It is boiling hot right now. It'll probably chuck it down in 3 minutes, even though the forecast said it's not going to. So I have no idea what's going to happen in a week. But if it is hotter next weekend as expected, and the tyres are softer, we might have to see some massive tyre saving at parts of the lap in qualifying.
Yeah, there's a chance you might get to that people tripping over each other on the warm up lap, which is which is going to end up being more of a keep cool lap, going as slowly as possible on their way to their full pace lap. Possibly, we'll see. I mean, keep an eye on Friday practice to see how they're managing these tires and how many laps they're going on, how fast and how quickly it drops off. There's going to be a lot of information we can extract out of that. I'm fascinated to see how these new these change in tire compounds at the same race compares, which we didn't get to see in Austria. And as you say, I think the forecast is the whole weekend is going to be like Friday was this week, in sort of early to mid 30s. It's going to be hot, hot, hot. So that's what's expected. But as you said, it could still rain at any point.
Could snow. I mean, anything happens there, doesn't it? Zach B has also contributed. Thank you very much. Says, I really wish this race was a few laps longer. Next week might be interesting. 2005 US Grand Prix ? And I almost forgot. Love you, Stuart. Every week. I love it. It's a good. I mean, first of all, it's 2020, so I wouldn't rule anything out, to be honest. We might see another 2005 US Grand Prix, but I'd like to think that the teams have got their heads together and the FIA have learnt from that and they won't fall into that trap again. Yeah, no. I'd be surprised. I don't think we'll see a US Grand Prix 2005 situation. I think it's far more likely that Pirelli would just turn around and say, we can't get the harder tyres here, you must stop at least twice. I think it's more likely we'll see that one. And Granny Annie, thank you very much for both of your contributions, says, that Merc is so good, it won with 3 wheels. That's another terrifying thought, isn't it? They can win on 3 wheels. They don't even need all 4. That's... wow.
Yeah, try not to think about that too hard.
And also, thank you again, Annette says, why do you hate cats, Sean? Because they're pure evil. And anybody who tries to tell me otherwise is just wrong. It comes from childhood, serious answer. I don't want to upset anybody, but I heard a really weird noise when I was younger in a shed. One of my dad's sheds, and went in and found a cat was sort of, let me finish the sentence, hanging there by its collar. It wasn't hanging by anything else. It was hanging by its collar. It was making an awful noise. And I saved that cat's damn life. And it scratched me and bit me. I will never forgive it for what it did to me when I was 12 or something like that. So I do hold grudges.
Oh, hero story, though.
Yeah.
I'm sure the cat community is grateful.
Although without sounding really dreadful, I'm 34 and I was 12 at the time and the cat was old then, so who's laughing now?
Oh my God.
I can't get on with cats. I'm very much a dog person. But yeah, childhood trauma, that's it. I was joking, by the way, about the cat. I love animals. I'm a softie like that, so yeah.
I just want to, not on the cat thing. I think you said enough on that cats. I wanted to say something earlier, actually. On the comparing it to the US Grand Prix tyre debacle type thing, I think one of the main differences that we have here is we have a single tyre supplier, so we don't get into this kind of like, oh, but Bridgestone brought the right tyre, so it would be unfair. And also we have pit stops now, and we didn't have pit stops in 2005. So it's much easier for Pirelli or the FIA or whoever to just say, you're doing 2 pit stops this race, no arguments, and the teams could just fall in line. There's much less complications to that than there was back then, when there was this whole big thing between Bridgestone and Michelin, and you couldn't change your tires during the race anyway. So yeah, that's what I would. My 2 cents.
Very good point. I always forget about the tyre war. In some ways, I miss that, but I think the cost and everything else and what happened in 2005 was, reason to maybe avoid that going forward. I was just going to say, we've got 5 minutes or so if you've got any questions, ideally related to the race, I'm going to try and, although I've just spoke about cats, I'm going to try and keep the race reaction questions to questions about the race. So if you've got any, pop them in chat and I'll read a couple in a moment. We've got a few minutes, but just your usual YouTuber stream dude reminder. If you are new to the channel, first of all, welcome, but please do consider subscribing. Lots of content coming up this season as we have this really weird calendar, which I'm loving, by the way, so far, the calendar. Very excited, particularly about the Nürburgring. And also, please do drop a like on the video or consider liking the video or stream. Massively appreciated as always, and really does help the channel out. I can't overstate how much a like does help the channel, so please do drop a like before you disappear today. Massively appreciated as always. And once again, because I can't stop saying it, thank you for 100k. I love you all. You're mad. But yeah, I just talk crap. Here we go. Right, questions about the race today. Let's have a look what we've got. We'll do speculation another time about seats, but I would not be surprised if Hülkenberg is considered for the Haas seats, but I have a feeling that Perez is going to be hot property if Vettel does end up at Alfa Romeo. So yes. LF Tipper, I could answer that straight away. Yes, I would. If you force to stop, would you enforce using all three compounds? Yes. I think that's a great idea. If we have to have a two-stopper, you've got to use all three compounds.
Initially, I was like, yes, do that. And then I was like, ooh, but people, no, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm with you on that. I was thinking, yeah, if you don't do that, they'll probably all converge to the same strategy anyway.
Yeah.
I don't.
I've gone the other way to you. That's a really good point.
I'm thinking, if you didn't do that, would there be more mix it up? And some people try and do two softs and a medium, and some people, So, yeah, why not?
No, yeah, we're just all going to end up with soft, medium to hard, aren't they? At least if you're allowed to mix it up, you might get a fast Red Bull at the end on the soft when Mercedes are on the hard, or yeah,
you might get some differences, because obviously some of the top teams who think they can do it might strap on a medium in Q2 so they can start their race on the medium. Racing Point did that this weekend and didn't quite pull it off as well as they hoped. So maybe they're not as fast here as they normally are. But yeah, why not? All three compounds. That would be interesting.
Raoul says, would you enforce a two-stopper, though? Here's the thing. I wouldn't, because it goes back to, I can't remember who else, so apologies, but whoever said it on stream earlier in the comment section, it's a great point. There are going to be teams who can manage the tyres, so we shouldn't punish them for doing a better job than others. So if a Mercedes, for example, can't manage to do it on one stop, they're going to have to pit twice. That's up to them. Whereas if a Williams or an Alfa Romeo are able to do it on one stop, let them. Do you know what I mean? I think enforcing the two-stop is unfairly punishing others, but at the same time, like I said, but I do expect that we might see at least it discussed amongst teams in Pirelli, because safety will be the priority in that situation. It always is nowadays with Formula One. So I wouldn't enforce it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it enforced, because I it's going back to what you said there, Stu, about the using three compounds, and it's going to force people to go the same way. What will happen is that we'll just end up with everybody doing two stops, and it won't be exciting. And then you've got Williams going, well, actually, we could have gone to the end on those, but we had to pit again. And you go, oh, they would have been 10th, and they've lost that point.
Yeah. I think if Pirelli put an official line down saying, these tyres, we recommend running for no longer than blah, blah, blah laps, then they've kind of covered themselves. Because if whoever, Mercedes, try and push it a few more laps beyond and then have a tyre failure, then Pirelli were like, well, we told you not to do that. And then it's just in the hands of the teams to decide if they want to sort of, how they want to manage the tyres to see if they can eke out a few more laps, or whether they want to do more stops to just run at full pace. I think basically, yeah, what you're saying, put it in the hands of the teams, give them information, let Pirelli wash their hands of the whole situation by giving advice, and then that's it.
I'm not sure. I'll ask the question, but I'm really not sure. From Rajat says, why do you think Stroll and Racing Point struggled this weekend? And I tell you what, actually, I'm gonna try and talk and go to my emails and see if they've said anything. I know they had balance issues with Stroll at some point over the weekend, possibly yesterday. Let's see what Lancey Boy is saying. The balance of the car was better today, and I expected us to be more competitive, but we slipped back in the race. It wasn't our day today. So now we have to focus on next weekend and make sure we come back stronger, blah, 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 PR, 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 PR. It's a shame, Nico, PR, PR, PR. Otmar Safenauer commenting on Nico Hulkenberg. So on the Hulkenberg thing then, the first indication of a problem was when they tried to fire up the car to go to the grid. There was basically a drivetrain seizure, the cause of which is still being investigated. And then it says, with Lance, we were especially unlucky with the timing of the safety car. Of course, yeah, that was a big impact on his race today, which also ruled out the strategic benefit of starting on the medium tyres. After that, we got stuck in the train of cars. So it was the DRS train. A few people pointed out on Twitter that just you couldn't overtake today for a lot of drivers. So they got caught in the DRS train and the safety car screwed them over, which means that he literally just, by virtue of setting the time first, got through qualifying into Q3 yesterday on the mediums, but that now wasn't worth the risk because they had to pit early anyway. So I think everything just fell apart for them. But I think even though it didn't directly affect Stroll because he was still in his car and he was still racing, there will have been some impact somewhere on the fact that he's all of a sudden got this new teammate and Sergio Perez has got COVID and it's all kicking off around him. There'll be an impact through the whole team. It's not an excuse, but I think that maybe played a part. But I think it is more the strategy by the sounds of it from them. But for Hulkenberg.
I'm intrigued as to essentially how valuable is Perez during free practice to, honing that car in both strategy wise and setup wise to get it ready for the race and qualifying, and how much of that was lost by not having him there. I'm not saying Stroll, doesn't contribute valuable information, but I'm wondering if Perez is stronger for the team in that level, and so they were a little bit more lost without him, because I think Hulkenberg's feedback would have been quite limited because he hasn't been driving that car, so he sort of has no baseline to compare it to. So maybe the absence of Perez was felt also.
Yeah, Extreme BHP. Extreme BHP has said the same there. Perez not there to assist with setup. Warren M also saying Perez wasn't there to set the car up this weekend. That's a very good point. Also, Raoul just saying that Merc 2019 had tyre issues, and because it's the same front end, maybe that is a contributing factor as well. Maybe. It's a good point.
Maybe.
It's a good point. I'll take one more from chat. I will take one more. And I'm going to go... I did a couple of people asking about the new trophies. I honestly didn't see them because I was busy prepping the stream. I missed the podium, you see. I caught the podium robots the other week, which, rip. Missed them already. But, yeah.
They look like trophies. They look like trophies. They're kind of like a rugby ball with handles sitting on a plinth. Big, fat, traditional trophies. If you can imagine what I just described.
I'll have a look on Twitter in a bit. I will, and I'll retweet something. But yeah, I'm loving the people as well on social media talking about how we're talking before this race about how long before Hamilton was complaining about his tyres being dead. I don't think he said over the radio to Bono, my tyres are dead, after his left front had exploded. It's like, oh, for God's sake, Lewis. The one time when you would have been spot on and you've gone and done that. Anyway, sorry, random. Somebody asked, and I'm going to quickly scroll up, and if I can't find it, I remembered it when I read it. Sorry, I can't find who it was, so apologies. You'll know who it is from the question, asking if anybody has fallen out of love with Formula One this weekend. Not for me. I will never fall out of love with Formula One. Is it the most exciting it's ever been at the front? No. Nobody's going to try and kid you of that. We'll try and build up hype every weekend and get excited for it, but we know, unless something crazy happens, Mercedes are probably heading for at least a win, if not a 1-2. They're going to win both championships, whether that's with Hamilton and Bottas in the drivers, I don't know. It's massively predictable. Getting on for 2014 dominance if it's not already there, and far more dominant than I believe than any era we've had in Formula One, because this is a good argument. The Ferrari one that gets thrown around a lot, 2000 to 2004 was really boring. Look at Ferrari dominance. In the middle of that, we had 2003, which was anybody's game. And we haven't had that in this era. So I do think we are in the most dominant era. So it's not thrilling and exciting at the very front, but what's happening behind is just so engaging. And some of the talent we've got on the grid is engaging. And I feel this year and next year, I mean, I would have felt it this year anyway, but because obviously these cars are being used next year, I feel like we're in a state of limbo, and we're kind of just waiting for those big regulation changes when I really do believe that a lot's going to change. Mercedes will still be up there fighting for wins and podiums and titles, of course they will. But there is just too many changes coming in 2022 for something not to change. So and also the Red Bull era. 2010 was epic. 2012 was fantastic as well. They weren't as dominant as this either. So I think this is probably the most dominant. It is an era, isn't it? 2014. I'm not talking about this season or this last couple of seasons. I'm talking about the turbo hybrid era. This has been Mercedes era, and it's been dominant, and that's a fact. But I will not fall out of love with Formula One. But part of that for me, and I don't know if you're the same, Stuart, and I can't talk for anybody else who's been watching a long time. I've been watching since '92. I've invested a lot of time in Formula One. I'm not just going to give up and go away. I'm not saying anybody else will, but I'm not going to fall out of love with Formula One anytime soon. And I hope 2022 will give us an epic scrap for what that waffle was worth. That is literally what that waffle boiled down to. No, 2022 should be great. That's a short version. Edit that for some highlights.
I think I agree. I am pinning a lot of optimism on 2022 for things to kind of get mixed up again. And I definitely agree that this is probably the most dominant era the sport has seen. It's definitely the most dominant era I've seen. I started watching at the end of the 90s, so I've seen the Ferrari 2000s era, the Red Bull 2010s era, and now this Mercedes turbo hybrid era. And I would say, yes, I think the championships end up being dominated by Mercedes, but we have a lot of races where the podium in some form is not set in stone. And we definitely, I would say, to be honest, start following drivers in the midfield, get excited about a lot of those drivers who aren't in Mercedes, and keep your eye on them. I think now more than any other time in F1, we've actually got some coherent TV coverage of the midfield. So if you like Ricciardo or Norris or Stroll or whoever, and you want to follow their season, their career, and get excited when they get into some high points, then you could do that. And there were, even in this race, there was a bunch going on in the midfield, and we didn't really have to worry about what Hamilton was doing until the last 3 laps. So there's still plenty to get excited about. I think the battle for the top of the championship kind of overshadows it a little bit. But if you're a McLaren fan and you're watching the last 2 years of them coming back and scoring more points than they have done in years, then that's, to me, that's a thrill. Watching what Norris and Sainz have been doing this season alone, I think, is quite thrilling. So yes, this is the most it's dominated at the top, but actually a little bit further down, there's still plenty to get excited about.
I think, and I feel like it's always been the case in Formula One, but you almost have to pick your battles, quite literally. If you've got a dominating team, you have to maybe go and look elsewhere for what's going to be interesting and what's exciting. And nobody can say that what's happening in the rest of the field isn't exciting, because you go into every weekend. This weekend, we all thought Racing Point were going to be second, and they weren't. They were nowhere. And Renault, everyone was saying, won't be anywhere. And there they are, 5th and 6th. And McLaren are right in the mix. And Ferrari are terrible. Leclerc on the podium. So you can't predict what's going on behind. And that's still great to watch. But I understand from a casual fan's point of view, and that's not a dig at all. Everyone's got to start somewhere. I'm not going to jump into flipping gatekeeping, because it's pathetic. You're all welcome on this channel. I don't care how long you've been watching or for what reasons. But for casual fans, it is about the championship for a lot of people. But I kind of feel like Drive to Survive has done a great job at bringing in some younger fans and some new fans who have gone, I really like that Daniel Ricciardo, and so they're watching the midfield because they're watching Danny Rick, and then others are watching Lando Norris because he's in the midfield, and other drivers as well. I think that's worked really, really well, and I think that's what's keeping this going. But yeah, it is what it is with Formula One. I hate that saying. It is what it is. I absolutely hate it. I don't know why. I just do. So yeah, it's just not. It's not going to be an exciting championship fight, and I'm sorry to Bottas fans, unless something dramatic happens between now and the end of however long this season is. I'd probably say, and in a way, I kind of nothing against Hamilton either. I really hope I'm wrong on this, but I think, and that you can come back to this stream and go, Sean was wrong again. But I think that's done as well, the Drivers' Championship. 30 points. If you've got both cars getting to the finish, that's a big... He's got to beat Hamilton over 3 or 4 weekends. I can't see that. Hamilton will win next weekend unless he has a problem, and I think he'll win in Spain as well comfortably. Spain is a Hamilton track, not even a Mercedes track.
Yeah, I wish... I used to get so frustrated with Rosberg, but that was a more exciting pairing. Like, looking at this race, actually, within about 20 seconds, I was a little bit frustrated because Bottas had got alongside Hamilton on the run to the first corner, and I know where Bottas was isn't the ideal place to be. I wish he'd just stuck his car in there a little bit instead of backing out of that corner and letting Hamilton hang on to the lead. And there were a lot of drivers who wouldn't have just backed out of it the way Bottas did. I just kind of wish he had stuck it in there, been a little bit brave and a little bit more cheeky. And I think that kind of sums up a lot about Bottas. He's not the killer driver that we need. I know he's basically exactly what Mercedes need, but everyone else watching, we'd want a Rosberg maybe or even a Verstappen or something who would not give up and maybe stretch against the border of acceptability to show Hamilton that he's not the only one in that team.
Yeah, and Nick just making the point in the chat there that don't forget DNFs can happen, and that's very true. But my thing is a DNF for Hamilton and Bottas wins with fastest lap. Hamilton still has a 4-point lead. I just don't see enough DNFs coming or enough drama. But then, like I said earlier, Mugello, Portimao, Nürburgring in October, Imola, they could be anybody's game because that could be a real leveler. So we'll see. Right now, it feels like that's done unless... I tell you what, not done. Hamilton's to lose. I think it's going to be Hamilton. I don't think... That's not fair. That's not fair on Bottas because if he turns it around, then he's won it, hasn't he? And it's not fair to say, he only won it because Hamilton didn't do this. But because I hate that kind of argument. And, whoever wins the championship deserves it. But I think it's Hamilton's to lose, really, at the minute is what I'd say. But yes, we'll leave it there because I answered. Oh no, I have a super chat. Sorry, I answered one question, managed to turn it into 12. I'm so good at that. Richard Phillips Studios, thank you very much for your contribution. Said, was Carlos responsible for Daniel overtaking Lando by backing up into him? I actually talked about this a little bit earlier, so I'll give you the very brief take on that one. I'd like to think there was some kind of team play there. I'm not 100% sure, but when you look at that, it does look very much like Carlos, or whichever one it was, has sort of slowed on the apex a little bit maybe, and just they've boxed him in to get Norris around the outside. So I'd like to think it because I kind of like that idea, but I'm not 100% on that one. And Homer Jones says, if by chance another driver tests positive, I can't see any team putting a rookie in the car over Hülkenberg. He may be the best option for any team and every team, says Homer. So thank you very much for your contribution as well there. That's a good point. I'm not going to get into the reserve driver situation because we've talked about this a lot on Twitter and on stream actually recently, Stuart. It's a bit of a joke, the situation they've got going, given everything going on. But it's a good point on Hülkenberg. I think you've now got a driver who is probably going to be in for next weekend as well, who will have done, apart from the race, obviously today, 2 race weekends. He's in the paddock. He's now in a bubble. If somebody needs a driver, he's probably going to be the go-to now.
I mean, yeah, it's a very interesting point. And ignoring the fact that it requires lots of people going down with COVID, it would be quite interesting to watch Hülkenberg just jumping from team to team, race on race throughout the season. Then he'd be an incredibly valuable driver for 2021. Then people will be, wow, you've seen inside every single car, so clearly want to nab you. Yeah, that would be very interesting. Yeah, and he's in a team that he kind of has nothing to do with, to be honest, right now. So yeah, very interesting.
Like, here, Nico, how does that DAS work? What do you know?
Yeah,
because he could go from he's in Racing Point now. And by the way, I hope no driver gets COVID. It's a debate for another day on whether these drivers should be going home. I would say on Perez. I'm not going to speculate on what the other rumours are as to what he was getting up to, but I can tell you right now, even if this entire country is in lockdown, knock on wood, if anything happens to my mum, up yours lockdown, I'm going to be with my mum. It's as simple as that. So I will defend him on that, but I'm not going to get into whatever was happening allegedly elsewhere with that one. But, Bottas, Leclerc going back to Monaco when their team are locked in a hotel, is that necessary? Really? I think there might be some changes to how things are. But anyway, we don't want any drivers to get COVID. Of course we don't. But Hülkenberg, 1 week in a Racing Point, 3 weeks later, he's in an Alfa Tauri. Then before he knows it, he's in a Mercedes. Then he's in an Alfa Romeo. He's going to have no idea. Last week, I was challenging for race wins. This weekend, I'm going to be lucky if I finish 19th. I mean, that's going to be crazy, isn't it? I mean, yeah. But I think he will be the go-to, especially with Formula E coming back as well now, because that ties up the likes of Buemi and Van Dorn, doesn't it? So that's a couple more reserve drivers down. So I think it will probably be a Hülkenberg as a go-to. But anyway.
Yeah, although once Formula E's over,
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of drivers who are suddenly available. I know they do some other racing, but that does open up your De Vries and your Van Dorns. Have you heard of Van Dorn? He's pretty good, and so on. That's it.
I'm trying
Really.
to think who Van Dorn is. I can't think I've ever heard of. Is that Steve Van Dorn or something like that?
Yeah, Steve Van Dorn.
Steve Van Dorn.
He's a bit of a hot shot. I've got a high price on his head.
Love it. Of course, yeah, Formula E back this week for 109 races in 7 minutes or whatever it's going to turn out to be. I love an exaggeration. Very much looking forward to that. Don't worry, I'm not going to get into... Freeze, I'm ending on that. 3014. Jean-Claude Van Dorn. I like it. We'll do that one. Thank you very much, Stuart, for this extended stream. We got on a right waffle there, didn't we? What's new? But really appreciate you coming along and chatting F1 with me. And Silverstone again next weekend for the wonderfully named, which is going to be great for thumbnails, 70th anniversary Grand Prix. Yay.
I do not like any of these alternate Grand Prix names they've been doing. I mean, even the Imola one was it Emilia Romana?
Yeah.
It's just so. I mean, okay, that's where Imola is. That's fine. It's just very long. But anyway, yes, I will see you there for the 70th anniversary Grand Prix # British Grand Prix.
That's a long hashtag. It's going to have to be British Grand Prix, or at least # Silverstone, isn't it? Because that's, yeah, you've run out of characters before you even put your tweet out. But anyway, yes. Yeah, I've said bye. That was it. Bye, Stuart. Thanks again. I'm so crap
mate,
at this. See you later, mate. Have a nice day.
Cheers.
Yes, thank you very much to Stuart and to you guys as well for tuning in. I do love a good waffle at the end of these streams. Good stuff. I will be back very soon. I'll get to the end screen. There we go. I'll be back very, very soon with more content. There'll be videos out start of next week, and then of course we'll be building up for the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. There won't be a preview, but I will do something next week because I've already done the preview for that. I'm not doing 2 previews for Silverstone because it's all the same. But yeah, anyway. And then it's on to the Spanish Grand Prix. Fingers crossed all being well, or possibly, depending on which rumour you read, if Spain can't happen, a third race at Silverstone, which they'll probably call the probably still be called the Spanish Grand Prix, you know what they're like. So yes, back next week with more content. Not really anything else to say, really. So I'm going to leave it there. Don't forget, you can, of course, follow me over on social media. All of the links you need for that are in the description down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and please do drop a like on the stream. Massively appreciated, as always. But as ever, thank you for watching, and hopefully I will catch you all again in the next one. Bye-bye.